Hello everyone, this is Swapna from Magic Paper Pixie. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. For today's video, I wanted to try my hand at some masculine themed cards. And since Father's Day is just around a month away, I thought I'll make some cards for Father's Day. I've already kept all my card bases ready. I've used the Craftangle's dual white textured cardstock for the card bases. For the first card, I'll be using the stamp set People of India. In this stamp set, I thought that the image of this uncle kind of resembled my dad. So I just wanted to mask the cap maybe and turn the image into a slightly different form and see how I can go with that for this card. So I stuck some washi tape on top of the cap and stamped the image. Once I stamped the image, I decided to use a Copic multi-liner pen and complete the rest of the image. My idea was to complete the image and kind of maybe make it look similar to my dad. And to be very honest, I couldn't stop smiling the entire time when I was drawing this image and coloring it. It really reminded me of my dad, and I think I was missing him a lot too since I haven't seen him in person for over a year. So this image is really cute, and I think this is almost exactly how my dad looks like. So here we go. I'm simply coloring this image with some Copic markers. In this, I have just sped up the coloring process since this is a very basic Copic coloring with dark and lighter shades towards the edges. Once I finished coloring the image, I fussy cut the image. I plan to make a very simple card. So I fussy cut this image and I simply plan to put it on top of my card panel with some watercolor background. Once I fussy cut the image, I went around this image with a black marker just to ensure that the edges are crisp. I then used some distress oxide and Tombows with a water brush on the card panel directly. I used the colors similar to Wilted Violet and Twisted Citron. All my base card panels measure 4.5 by 5.5 inches. I think I missed mentioning this at the beginning of the video. Basically, all my card panels are A2 size. I then adhered some double-sided foam tape on the backside of the fussy cut image and simply adhered it on top of the watercolor panel. Now my idea was to keep the card really simple as much as possible, and I just wanted to stamp a sentiment to go along with this card because I think the image itself is really cute and I didn't really want to disturb the entire card and take the focus away from the image. I simply went ahead and stamped the sentiment to the best dad ever, and I think the card just looks really cute as it is. Then I decided to stamp another sentiment inside the card that says I love you. I am sure you can write this with your marker as well, but since the stamp was handy, I went ahead and stamped this image. This is how the first card looks. Now moving on to the second card. For this I decided to use my stencil, that is hexagonal stacks. I just wanted to do a simple stenciled background with distress oxides along with the sentiment. Now masculine cards can be kind of tricky because you want to keep it minimalistic but you still want it to be bright and eye-catchy. So for this card I decided to use some bright distress oxide along with the sentiment. I die cut the letters DAD for dad and was planning to place it as a focal point on the card. So I decided to place the stencil diagonally and just to twist things up a little. In this I have used the blending brushes by Craftangles and blended 3 distress oxide colors. First is Wilted Violet, Peacock Feathers, and the second half of the card I have used Peacock Feathers and Twisted Citron. I have simply already marked with a pencil where I'll be placing my stencil so that while I am ink blending I do not go over the line. I do recommend having a rough paper just in case your fingerprints go over the ink blended places, or in case the ink blending spills onto parts where you do not wish or you didn't intend. I do recommend taping the stencil with the washi tape on the back side so that the cardstock doesn't move. Here I am still figuring out how I would like to place the die cut alphabets. I thought the die cut alphabets looked pretty plain, so I decided to jazz it up a little by using glossy accents. Now my glossy accents bottle is a little older, and I couldn't manage to get it out of the nozzle, so I decided to use a brush, open up the bottle and spread it over the alphabet dies. Glossy accents dries clear and it really looks pretty classy, and I like the effect that it gives. I finally decided to stamp the sentiment, the superhero I grew up watching, along with the die cut alphabets dad. Once I stamped the sentiment, I thought it wasn't really clear, so I went over with my Copic multi-liner pen all over the sentiment and even filled out the double letters superhero. Before that, I adhered the alphabet dies dad using a ruler just to ensure that it is stuck on straight over the card. I thought the card needed a little bit of shine or glitter, so I decided to use a gold mirror cardstock as a back panel before adhering it to the card, and I also decided then to cut tiny slivers of the gold mirror cardstock and place it along the the diagonal lines where I had blended with my stencils and distress oxides. Once I adhered all this, I also went ahead and adhered some jewels and small sequins just to give it a little more shine. Finally, I stuck the card panel along with the gold mirror cardstock on the card base, and I like the final look of the card. I think it has the right amount of glitter and shine to complement the stencil and distress oxide blending. I hope you like this second card too. For my third card, I decided to use the main image from the stamp set My Superhero. In this, I wasn't really sure where I was going with the card when I started initially. Initially, I thought that I might fussy cut this image, but then I decided against it. I stamped this image using a stamping platform. I recommend this since this image is pretty long and it might not fit on your acrylic block, as well as this, since it's almost a solid image, this image might require double or triple stamping it. So I definitely recommend a stamping platform to stamp this image. And I was initially confused if I wanted to color the image or just leave it black and white and give it a monochrome kind of look. But then I decided against it. I wanted to color it a little bit. But before that, I decided to cut the entire panel with a background panel die. Once I cut this, I ensured that the image is towards one side of the card, and I decided to use some very basic Copic coloring. I didn't want to really color the image as such. Just to give it a little bit of interest, I decided to use some Copic markers on the card. So I just did some basic coloring, some browns, some shades of browns, yellows and blues, just to give it an added interest. Once I was done coloring the card, I was wondering what stamp or what sentiment I would rather use on this card. I decided to go with a simple sentiment, Happy Father's Day. And I think it's a really cute sentiment, and I especially like the mustache on it. So I decided to stamp that card. And the mustache image, the solid image, I went over it with a multi-liner pen as well, just to ensure it's dark. I wanted to make a background for it, but I was not comfortable giving it a heavy background because I wanted the image to stand out. So I used a stencil, circle stencil, and used broken china distress oxide just to go over it. I then decided to use a navy blue cardstock as a background panel before finally adhering it to the card base. I think the navy blue card color, the cardstock, looked really pretty and complemented the image with the basic coloring that I have done. but I then decided to place the panel slightly tilted just for added interest. I thought it just gives a different look from the conventional image. I just adhered it with some double-sided tape and made sure that the panel is a little tilted on the card base. Like I mentioned before, I just went over the mustache stamp with my Copic multi-liner pen just to ensure that it's a little darker. And this is how my third card looks. I hope you like all three of my Father's Day cards. I have an additional small little bookmark that I made using the Dad stamp set by Craft Angles. The stamp set is 2 by 3 inches and it's perfect for making bookmarks or tags. So I used the watercolor paper by Craft Angles and used the stamp set and decided to use this particular stamp set for this bookmark. I rounded off the edges of the bookmark and also adhered an eyelet on top of it to put in a string or a tag. I decided to use the Distress Oxide inks, picked raspberry, spiced marmalade and wild honey. I directly went with the ink pad on top of the watercolor pen and sprayed some water on top of this panel. Once it dried, I would definitely recommend you to wait till it's dried because you won't be able to stamp the image properly otherwise. I used this image, but this time I used archival ink. Since it was watercolor paper, I used archival ink for this particular stamp set and stamped this sentiment on top of the bookmark. I used my Misty for it because since the texture of the watercolor paper is slightly rough, you might need to stamp this image maybe more than 2-3 times to ensure that the image is completely transferred. I also went over this sentiment with a Copic multi-liner pen just in case there were areas where it didn't get stamped properly. I also used a golden glitter glue, that is stickles, just to give it an additional shine before adhering some sequins on top of it, and finally adhered a glittery ribbon on the eyelet. I hope you like how this tag, which can also be used as a bookmark, looks. Here are a few close-up images of all the cards and the bookmark that we made today. Do let me know how you like them. Please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't already for more ideas and inspiration. Until later, stay safe and happy crafting.